Good afternoon and welcome. Before we jump into it, let me make just a couple of brief housekeeping announcements, and then we'll get right down to what we're here for. First, we've applied for CLE credit in South Carolina. So if you're a South Carolina lawyer and you'd like credit for attending this event, I'd ask that I need a record of your attendance. So if you can, at the bottom of your screen, use the Q&A function and send a message that will be viewable only by me that has your name and your South Carolina bar number. When we're about halfway through, I'll remind you, ask you to do that again so we can make sure you're still with us. And then finally, at the conclusion of the event, I'll ask you one last time to send me a third message. I also want to very briefly preview a couple of upcoming events to put on your calendar. We'd love to see you there. Next week, on Thursday at 2 o'clock, we'll be having a virtual roundtable between three attorneys general: South Carolina's own Alan Wilson, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, and Nebraska's Attorney General Doug Peterson. It's going to be a fun event, and I'd love to see you there. The week after that, on September 14th, Cato Institute's Ilya Shapiro will be with us live in Columbia and viewable by Zoom for those elsewhere to preview the upcoming Supreme Court term and his forthcoming book, Supreme Disorder: Judicial Nominations and the Politics of America's Highest Court. A couple weeks after that, we'll be hosting Judge Jeff Sutton from the Sixth Circuit and Ed Whelan to discuss their book, The Essential Scalia. Now, nobody came today to listen to me give announcements about CLE credit, and I know you're all excited to hear from Senator Graham. If we've ever had a speaker who truly needs no introduction, this is he. And I know you'd all rather hear from him than to hear me talk about him. So we'll jump right into it. Senator Graham, let me lead into my first question with a little bit of a wind-up. Since its founding, the Federalist Society has been deeply concerned with the role of the federal judiciary. One of the founding principles of the society is that in our constitutional system, it is emphatically the role of the judiciary to say what the law is,
right,
what it should be. Now, one of the ways that we do that, one of the ways we advance that principle as a nation, is by selecting and elevating judges who share that. Now, recently, under your leadership as chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, the Senate surpassed 200 confirmations of President Trump's judicial nominees. And for the first time in, I believe, more than 40 years, every vacant Circuit Court of Appeals seat has been filled. What does this mean? What does this achievement, this effort mean for the future of the federal judiciary?
Well, number one, to the Federalist Society, thank you very much for having me and honoring me. And I really appreciate what you do for the cause of good judging, giving us input about nominees. And I would say to efforts to prohibit people from being a member of your society and still be a judge, we'll stop that with all my might. That's just ridiculous. If you can be a member of the ABA and be a member of any group in good standing you would like to be, it's okay to be conservative and a lawyer, at least where I come from. The bottom line is, what does it mean? It means that President Trump has done more than anybody in my lifetime to reshape the federal judiciary to a center-right judiciary by focusing on filling every vacancy. Chuck Grassley was the chairman for the first 2 years of President Trump's term, did a great job. We've done 53 Court of Appeals, 2 Supreme Court nominees, 146 district judges, and we have 70 district court vacancies, 49 nominations. We'll probably do 30. We've done 120 on my watch. We've made it a priority. Mitch McConnell deserves a lot of credit. We're in the appointment business in the Senate. Now, I can tell you, for all those who campaign on our behalf and say that judges matter, Trump heard you. I heard you, Mitch McConnell heard you, and we have delivered. And here's what I would urge you to think about. 4 more years of this. 4 more years of picking circuit court judges. We flipped the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 11th districts. 4 more years, we can flip more district circuits. The bottom line is there'll be at least a couple of vacancies, I think, between 2020 and 2024, and we'll have a chance to fill those if President Trump can get reelected and we hold the Senate. Think about that. think about how satisfied you must be as a Federalist Society member of President Trump and the Republican Senate. Thank you for this acknowledgement. So the bottom line for me is that one of the big issues for the nation is what kind of judiciary you'll want to have. And I think that's going to loom large on the ballot. And there will be an effort by the Democratic Party, this is an expressed effort now, to expand the number of judges on the Supreme Court. They're openly talking about that. Numerous liberal groups are trying to expand it from 9 to dilute the conservative center-right agenda we've created. So I just think this has been one of the great accomplishments for President Trump, myself, and Mitch McConnell, and lots at stake in 2020 race.
Let me ask you a follow-up to that. You mentioned some of the statistics, the numbers of judges. So in the 8 years of President Obama's administration, a total of 55 federal appellate court seats were filled. That's over 8 years. Thus far, in less than 4 years, 53 seats have been filled under the current administration. So nearly on pace with
Right.
what it took 8 years before. What does that tell us about the priority, the amount of effort and emphasis that Leader McConnell and yourself and others have placed on this?
It tells you everything you need to know. It tells you that in one term, we've done as much as Obama did in 2 terms. It tells you that Mitch McConnell and President Trump and myself see picking judges as one of the most important functions of the United States Senate and the presidency of the United States. We had 2 conventions, the Republican convention, Democratic convention, and almost nothing was said about protest and disorder in the streets. The Republican convention focused heavily on law and order and supporting victims of crime. And so what you talk about determines what your priorities are. I think we have done a good job of proving through our actions that when we talk about making the judiciary more into interpreting the law rather than making it from the bench, that we have delivered. And I hope people will remember that.
Let me ask you as well about a particular moment from the past couple of years. On September 27th, 2018, so this was right in the middle of the contentious confirmation hearings for then Judge Brett Kavanaugh, now, of course, a justice on the Supreme Court. On that day, you delivered remarks at a hearing of the Senate Judiciary Committee that some observers have identified as crucial to then Judge Kavanaugh's eventual confirmation, and that Ilya Shapiro, in his forthcoming book, Supreme Disorder, has identified as, quote, your greatest moment. Talk to us a little bit about that moment and about the obvious emotion, the passion that was present in the room.
Well, let's put it, why did people listen to what I had to say? Jeremy, because I voted for Sotomayor and Kagan. Nobody would have cared if I'd gotten mad about the way they treated Kavanaugh. I'd just been one more mad person. But I had something that nobody else had. The ability to look the Democrats in the eye and say, what the hell are you doing? I would never have done this to Sotomayor and Kagan. You know, you want power too much. There's nothing you won't do. You want to keep this seat open. You don't care how qualified he is. You want to make the pick yourself in 2020, and you were dumb enough to say that. What got me going is I've known Brett Kavanaugh for almost 20 years. I know him to be one of the most capable people any Republican president would nominate to the Supreme Court. Here's the one thing that united the party. Kavanaugh was the private secretary of President George W. Bush. He met his wife working for the Bush administration. President Bush was on the phone day in and day out calling Republican senators vouching for Kavanaugh. So you had the Bush group, and you had the Trump group, and you had the McCain group, and the Romney group. All of us believed that anybody on the Republican side would have put Brett Kavanaugh on their short list along with Gorsuch. So what happened was we saw this as an attack on us, conservatism. We saw what they were doing to Brett being crossing a line of wanting power too much. I saw it in terms of an offense against a friend and a betrayal of what I had tried to do to right the ship. Since Clarence Thomas, Bork, uh, Alito went through all this, every Republican conservative is a racist, blah, blah, blah. I've never seen it so bad with Kavanaugh. Why is it always our people? So what I said that day, I meant. I looked every one of them in the eye and said, I would never have done this to your nominees. I wouldn't have chosen Sotomayor or Kagan, but I thought they were qualified. And Brett Kavanaugh was as qualified as anybody who's ever been nominated to the Supreme Court. He's an exceedingly good man. And what we were doing to him was unconscionable. And here's why it matters. If they had succeeded in driving him away and he had withdrawn, who would be next on our side? What young conservative man or woman would want to throw their hat in the ring and go through this garbage? You got to remember the accusations against Brett Kavanaugh were 5. 3 of them were anonymous, and 2 of the 3 proved to be absolute manufactured. And what happened to Dr. Ford, I think, was real somewhere, sometime. But I'm confident Brett Kavanaugh had nothing to do with it. You're talking about a party in high school where nobody could validate the claim. Everybody that was supposedly there said it didn't happen. And we're talking about how many beers he had when he was in high school, and a party that was not defined in date and location. And it was just a complete low point in my career in the Senate. And I spoke up, as I am right now. The more I think about it, the more pissed I get, because a lot was at stake. If they had succeeded in doing this, you would have changed the type of people that would come forward to want to be a judge, because a lot of people would be driven away, and anything they could do, we could wind up doing. So I think the best thing that happened here is that he made it onto the court, and I think they'll be less likely to do this to the next nominee because it blew up in their face. And I think it affected Senate races in that cycle. And I just want to let you know that when I voted for Sotomayor and Kagan, it didn't make me less conservative. I did what Thurman did with Ginsburg and Hollings did with Scalia, followed the traditions of qualifications, not ideology. And now, after Kavanaugh, everything has changed, and thank God he is on the bench. And to the extent that I motivated people on our side to stand up for him, I am glad. But from my point of view, the real hero here, as much as anybody, Susan Collins, because she had the courage to evaluate Brett Kavanaugh as a judge and as a human being, and found him to be highly qualified.
So let me follow up on that. You mentioned a second ago Robert Bork, Justice Thomas, Justices Ginsburg, Sotomayor, and Kagan, and then you said it seems like now all of that's changed. So let me toss out a couple statistics and then get your reaction. So Justice Ginsburg confirmed in 1993 by a vote of 96-3, and spoiler alert, the margins are going to get narrower as we go. Justice Sotomayor, 2009, confirmed 68-31. Justice Gorsuch, 2017, 54-45. Justice Kavanaugh, 2018, 50-48. So the trend there, I mean, it doesn't take a statistician to see the increasingly bitter and narrow margins there. Is the continuation of that trend inevitable, or can it be a reverse? Is this like a door that only swings one direction and it's never coming back?
I think Pandora's box has been opened, and Kavanaugh shut it a bit as to how far you would go. But Harry Reid did more, I think, to unleash these forces than anybody in recent memory, by changing the rules to a majority vote for the Circuit Court of Appeals. When they had power, they went away from the 60 vote requirement to confirm a judge to 50 votes for circuit and district courts. They didn't go to the Supreme Court. The bottom line here is I think you're going to have more ideologically driven nominees, because you really don't need to reach across the aisle and pick up a vote like you used to. I don't see the rules changing anytime soon. We had to change the rules for Gorsuch because he was filibustered twice. And I would say, as to Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, nobody can look you in the eye with a straight face and say they're not equally qualified to Sotomayor and Kagan. So the point is that conservative nominees have been treated incredibly unfairly. It all crescendoed with Kavanaugh. When Harry Reid decided to change the rules, that's changed the entire nominating process. And what I fear over time is if we don't turn it down a notch, that good men and women will be more reluctant to want to be a judge because of what you have to go through. And I would say this, I think Kavanaugh having survived was a great thing because it shows that these tactics didn't work.
Well, Senator Graham, we want to be respectful of your time. If it's all right, can I give you one last question? If it's not an intrusion on your schedule, I know you've got other things, we don't want to keep you from it. A little bit earlier in your remarks, you mentioned that I think it's something like more than 300 special interest groups and a few of your colleagues have voiced support for the idea of expanding the number of justices on the Supreme Court. Now, this wouldn't be the first time the idea has ever been discussed, right? Nearly, I think it was a century ago, during the New Deal, there was a court packing plan that it led to, my recollection from law school was the switch in time that saved nine is the phrase that they use. So there's been discussion of this at least once before, but it's never been done. It would be unprecedented in terms of being done. Do you sense that there's any actual support? Is there any likelihood of that going?
So look at Chuck Schumer. He's probably going to get challenged by AOC in a primary. So let's talk about some of the things that the Democrats in the House are openly talking about. Making D.C. a state. Well, if you want people in D.C. and residential areas to vote, let them vote in Maryland congressional races. Alexandria was ceded to Virginia so people in the greater D.C. area could vote. There's a way to enfranchise people in the D.C. area without making it a state. If you make D.C. a state, that's two Democratic senators in perpetuity. They're talking about making Puerto Rico a state. They're talking about doing away with the Electoral College. In South Carolina, we've become far less relevant. But one of the most egregious things they're talking about doing is expanding the number of judges so they can dilute the center-right majority we've created over time. And from 2020 to 2024, there'll be, I would think, 1, 2, maybe 3 vacancies. But yes, they're trying to reshape the way our founding fathers created America to their advantage. They're trying to do away with Electoral College. They're trying to reshape what a judge does and the number of people serving on the Supreme Court. They're trying to add states in a manner that I think is just overwhelmingly partisan. And if we lose the House and Republicans lose the Senate and Biden wins, I think most of what I just described has a better than 50-50 chance of coming true because they will try to change the rules of the Senate to do away with the legislative requirement, filibuster getting 60 votes. Schumer and all the leadership in the Senate will be under enormous pressure from the left. So a lot's at stake. My opponent, we'll talk about where he's at versus where I'm at later on, and that's when we have elections. But today's about the Federalist Society. The day's about you thanking me. I want to thank you for helping me make sure that we have good information about judicial nominees, making it aware to South Carolinians how much judges matter in our life, and to taking a stand for conservative judicial philosophy, which is absolutely a great thing to be doing. You shouldn't be ashamed of it. And any efforts to blackball your group will be met with fierce opposition by me and many others. So thanks.
Thank you. I know we've already kept you a few minutes longer than I originally asked for. So we appreciate your time. We appreciate your leadership and your efforts in Washington. And thanks again for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you all.